So, hello. I think we're live now. So, Marianne, Clements, we're back for session 3 of Liberating Leadership. For those people that might be joining us new, just to let you know, you can make comments, say hello. You can say hello. I'll say hello maybe in here, just to show you what I mean, because there isn't any. There we go. You can say hello, tell us who you are and where you are if you'd like to. But also you can make comments or ask questions during this presentation. So also just to remind people, it's being recorded for people that aren't able to be here today. And that also means that whatever you put in those question boxes will be visible to people. So just be aware of that. And yeah, I think without further ado, then we're going to get started. So as I said, I'm Marianne Clements, the initiator of Healing Solidarity and Healing Solidarity Collective. And for this session, I'm with Roshni. She is, I think, in Mumbai, right? Yeah. And I'm just going to invite you first to just tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you do before we jump into our conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hello. It's nice to see everybody, and I've been listening in some of the other conversations. So thank you, Marianne, for having me as part of this. I'm Roshni Nuggehalli. I'm based in Mumbai, and currently I work with an organization called YUVA. We've been around for 35 years, primarily working in the human rights, social justice space in India, and specifically focusing on issues of urban poverty and poverty alleviation. So through housing, basic services, informality of labor, and also working on collectivization and collective strengthening of women, children, young people, of course. And it's our 35th year, so very exciting time for us to really reflect on our journeys, and go ahead and see what new exciting things we have. But like I said, very happy to be here for us, because we were started by young people way back in 1984. Young people's leadership and leadership of supporting people to really do what they want to do and feel empowered to do that has always been important for us. So I've been with YUVA for 5 years, and it's been an exciting journey for me, and happy to share some conversations today. And yeah, thank you.
Great. So we're going to start by asking you to tell us a bit about your personal journey with leadership. So yeah, please tell us about it.
Sure. Having spent my whole career so far, about 13, 15 years in the social justice, social development space, I realized that senior roles were offered to me fairly early on, perhaps because I had some surface, level skills of being a good manager or whatever. So, but in the initial years of these positions, I never really acknowledged myself as a leader. There was a lot of imposter syndrome, which many of us will know about, for being young, for being a woman, for coming from a background of privilege. So I was successful in, what was those roles, but not really at peace. There was always this sense of, there were some gaps that were staring, at me. And so because there wasn't that peace, there was also this sense of impulsiveness and a little bit of needing to have change and, unsettled sort of a feeling. Yeah. And, more recently, well, like I said, 5 years ago, I took on the role of leading YUVA. And contrary to everybody's, hopes and expectations, there was a rapid decline, like from day one to quite a, very low space where, I felt overburdened by expectation, by the legacy of earlier leaders, their shining glories, because we were, 30 years old, and lots of great things that happened. Also by hostility, feeling incapable, so on. And this, it of course felt horrible being in that space. It felt really, really bad. But I think it was actually a huge blessing, because being in that space really forced me to reflect, to hold a mirror to myself, look at who I was with a sense of, distance and equanimity, that, this is who I am, and let's start accepting that. And I also started working with some senior members in YUVA, the larger YUVA space, not employees, but, friends and supporters, who really spoke to me about, claiming power. And one of the things that one of them said was getting my breathing back to normal. And that to me was like, it meant a lot. It really helped me. And And once that happened, he said that I could then realize, that magic would happen and I could be a leader. It sounded a little abstract, but it really worked. So, I started meditating, literally, getting my breathing back to normal, talking about bringing, the sun back into my life and so on. And then, I started to sort of forgot about what I was supposed to do and just
Mhm.
do what I, naturally knew or didn't. So I think sort of separating this position and designation and all the accompanying stressors from what I came to do in Yuva, to really help change happen. That really worked for me. That sort of separation of, let's set that aside and let's really focus on, being more natural, being more free flowing. And also, I mean, it helped me to start looking at my personality traits, of introversion, of staying in the background, of not speaking much, of having
Mhm.
a lot of faith, of forgiveness, not as weaknesses in this, quote unquote leadership journey, but actually something that I could recognize as a strength and maybe start using to actually make, something better happen to my advantage. So I think these were some of the, I guess, things that really mattered for me. And of course, this didn't happen overnight. It's a work in progress. But I
Mhm.
think there was that, that whatever that moment when I started accepting to myself that yes, I'm a leader, and then it started to trust my instincts more. So they might
Mhm.
go against the accepted norm, but let's just be there and let's just see that this is coming from some place. It's not all out there. And since then, I've noticed that I'm not as uptight anymore, and there is a lot of lightness. And I think because of that lightness in the way that I work, it gives me momentum even when the lows occur. And they're going to happen, it's inevitable. But I feel that now I'm not falling as hard or as landing, I mean, falling
Mhm.
so deep or landing as hard, because I know that you've been there, done that. You sort of already hit that, low.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
mean, for me, I think the biggest aha at some point was, hey, if I'm a leader and I'm happy and content in this space and feel vibrant and excited, then surely everyone else is. That was really a big
Yeah.
moment for me. And so then I started thinking, let's try this out, with the rest of the organization. Let's start working towards a culture where everyone feels this way. Everyone feels that they are a leader and feels this sense of excitement and energy, and not 100% of the time, but even when the lows happen, that you can reach where to get back to. So I think in terms of hitting somewhere really deep and then really starting to trust myself again, and using, of course, some self rejuvenation methods and processes, really trying to bring myself back to a place where I felt most comfortable, and through that claiming power. I think that has really helped. And again, it's a work in progress, but at least
Mhm.
you're at a space where you can say that you're a leader and say it with faith and humility, and then see how to go from there. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear that. I think it's probably it's an experience I've had too. So maybe it's a common experience, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like when you have the really bad patch, that's when you find out
Yeah.
what it is too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the, so this thing of claiming leadership as something you could own and then you could invite other people to own.
Yeah.
Um, I'm interested in that process. Like the breathing sounds like a really good like first thing. And then what else did it take for you to really claim that? Was there any what were the other processes or other things you had to
Yeah.
move through?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, separating this whole the position, the formal position and the
Yeah.
formal role from who you are, so that you can actually. I mean, it worked for me, I think, and it's also I've seen that it works for others, because there's always different people react to that differently. These burdens of position and role. So I
Mm-hmm.
think just keeping that aside and trying to be your natural self, I think that helps you, ironically, in actually playing that role better, because you are actually being
Mm-hmm.
free and open to do it. And even Ella spoke about earlier being free, and I think that really made a lot of sense to me also. That definitely separating that, but also supposing you don't have like a designation or a position, or
Yeah.
you just feel like you're a cog in the wheel. I think even at that in that space, really believing that you have it all in you, or you can build it in you to make change happen. And we're in the social justice space. We want change. That's what, that's what we're here for. Really, just believing that about yourself and finding a support structure which helps you reinforce that belief and helps you sharpen that belief, I think is very important, because it's not something that can be done, in isolation. And I mean, we hear a lot of things about people saying leadership is a lonely, journey, which is true. But I think it's also our job to change that. How can we surround
Mhm.
ourselves with people who don't let it be only a lonely journey, right? Otherwise, then it's so harder. It's so much harder to get out of that space. So I
Mhm.
think definitely finding that support structure. It doesn't have to be even mentors. It doesn't even have to be, people you see every day, but one or two conversations with certain people who understand you and who can really lift you in those moments, I think are very important. And it almost sounds like this is not really working on the role or the leadership, but really about making yourself, putting yourself in a better position. And then that stuff, the work and the role sort of will be a little more downstream, but it comes much more easier when you sort of sorted this inside, stuff, and feeling more at peace and content. And even now I find that, at moments when I stop reaching out to these points, say whether it's meditating or whether it's reaching out to people who support you, then you can see yourself sort of slipping. So it's something that you have to, keep at. I mean, it's not like boom, it's done and it's once and for all. But definitely uh, looking at myself more deeply and accepting myself and finding people
Mhm.
to, lift you up when you need that, I think that has really helped in claiming the
Mhm.
power and feeling, yeah.
And I'm thinking about how you found people. Like, it sounds like you sort of reached out in informal networks and stuff to find people who could
Yeah.
be supportive to you. But how do you invite that in people who work with you? Do you have support structures, or are they more
Yeah.
informal?
Yeah. So what we've been trying to do, is because we do have this sort of approach that everybody is a leader and everybody can claim that power. We've sort of tried to create different sorts of groupings. So we are not calling them structures, maybe teams or groupings. So of people who work on similar issues or who have a similar sort of a profile. So maybe we have a field leadership grouping where everybody who does more, a lot of grassroots work, they connect with each other. And we do invest in that, building that space and that grouping. So we do, it can be part mentorship, it can be part maybe off-site trainings, but it's a little loose in that sense. But definitely there is also some identity of people who feel that they are connected. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even in these spaces, it's the initial steps are always about understanding yourself and, being more open to your own weaknesses and not treating that as a something to be something negative, but something that you can actually use to, to move out of your comfort zone and so on. So I think these groupings is something that has worked for us. So we've very deliberately sort of tried to get, so this covers everybody in the organization. So maybe you
Mm-hmm.
are a city grouping, maybe you're in a field, leadership grouping, and then having different sorts of processes with each of these groups and seeing where that takes us. Again, no set formula. Like, I mean, some people have asked, have like a module. So there isn't like a set formula, I think, but also going with your own instinct and feel and trying to figure out where the pulse lies at a
Mm-hmm.
certain point in time. And this will also change. So if people come and go out of these spaces, then, you'll also have to reinvent in terms of what are the inputs and the investments you're doing in
Mm-hmm.
that. And yeah, sometimes we've hit really very high highs, and sometimes we've done something or something has happened which has told us that this is not going to work. So maybe this is not the approach. We'll have to do something else. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, creating those spaces where people feel connected with each other who work on similar issues, and then investing in that regularly. I think that has really helped. So this is different from the organizational structure and, whatever hierarchy we have. That continues, but this is separate. It's been quite interesting, and different people have reacted to it differently. Initially, it's also some responses were like, "What's the point of this when we already have, some other sort of a structure?" And will this replace that? A lot of sort of existential questions. But I think now we are beginning to accept that this is the real space, these other sorts of things are there because maybe we need to sign a grant, or we need to ask for an appointment with the minister, but this is where we are going to spend our time and energy. And so it's good that that shift is happening. It's slow, but we're working towards it.
It's interesting. How I mean, you've answered some of this already, but I was thinking about how do you communicate this idea of everyone is a leader, or everyone can be a leader within the organization? I guess part of it is that structure you just spoke about, but do you do anything else to kind of communicate the idea?
Yeah, so we also, like, I mean, this is a little specific, but maybe it might be useful to share. We have, our organizational reviews where we're supposed to look at our annual plans and, our half-yearly progress and so on and so forth, which are typically held, they have a certain format. What we've started sort of doing is we take about a day in each of these reviews to talk about certain issues which we think develops everybody's leadership. So one whole day we spoke about well-being. So it happens with maybe some input, group work, sharing conversations. So we spent a whole day talking about that. Then another time we spoke about a conflict, and how we look at conflict as something that can actually help transform relationships and make change happen. Another time we spoke about change and approach to change, and how there's positive, negative, how do we deal with it. Another time we spoke about love, and how do we really integrate love into our lives. So this, I mean, I think people have now, when we started it again, there was sort of like, oh, what's going on, this is a bit weird and a little uncomfortable, and why are we talking about these sorts of touchy feely kinds of things? We're here to do activism, or we have serious business going on. But I think now it's taken about, I think, 2 years, but I think now there is almost an anticipation, and there are like suggestions of what we need to talk about. And so this is, it's not like there's just a declaration that everyone is a leader. The very fact that we're talking about things which are not just work, it's really about yourself, and how do you connect with others, and how do you make yourself, put yourself in a better space so that you can do more of the work that you want to do. The very fact we're talking about that, I think, is impacting people's own leadership journeys, and there's space to talk about that. It's a formal space, it's like the most important space in the organization where everybody is part of it. And then this sort of, then people take it into their own team conversations, and it's almost as if you just need to nudge something, and then you don't have to really be part of everything else, because then everybody sort of takes it up in their own ways. You just need to sort of do a little bit at the beginning. But it's taken time. It's taken 2 years, and there has been, like initial pushback, or doubt of what is going on, and also criticism. But I mean, we are soldiering along. Yeah.
With that kind of doubt and criticism, it sounded like it shifted when people saw the impact to some extent. Is that right? That the impact.
And also, I mean, I think the sense that it's, hey, okay, we are being approached not just as a role or a designation, or I'm not a leader enough because I'm not occupying, I'm not in a certain position, but I'm also being valued. Like, what I am saying and wherever I am is actually being respected. And, what I feel about conflict and how I deal with conflict is important, not just to me, but to the organization. The organization is willing to discuss it and, find ways to work on it. I mean, just that sort of valuing everybody's personal lives and journeys, and of course, connecting back to why they're even in this space at YUVA. I think that, that was the impact, which is sort of maybe, made that shift.
Absolutely. It's interesting. And then I wonder how that has that it then impacted how, I mean, I think you said it had, but I'm wondering how that's impacted how people show up to the rest of the work. Does it feel a bit different?
Yeah. I mean, I think, because of these sort of groupings where they feel a little more closer and there's a little more trust, they understand each other's life journeys. I think there's a little more acceptance in terms of difference. Like one of the challenges, we face as an organization when we're talking about everyone as leaders, is this whole issue of merit. Because there is a sort of a merit, we always value outcomes and outputs, and that's natural. Some of us are better at doing that than others. But how can we build this organization where we are valuing everyone as a human being, and yet not undervaluing anybody's achievements? It's not a one or the other, and it is a constant struggle. And we have a lot of discussions about this internally. How do we remain fair? How do we focus on effort? In a culture that's obsessed with just achievement, where do we draw the line between empathy and pity? And we don't have any set answers, but these conversations are happening. That it's not a simple answer to anything. There's no simple answer for you've done this and hence you are good or you're not good. So these sorts of complex conversations are happening, I think, and I mean, there's no one answer, and I wouldn't even think I have an answer to how do you deal with this whole meritocracy, and especially like a country like India, it's a big deal. So, but yeah, I think how do we value everybody's experience? These things have definitely, those are some of the shifts I think that are coming, and also just a lot of the people who work with us also come from experiences of struggle, and their lives have been quite difficult. But at the same time, we also have people from more privileged backgrounds who are professional, working in the social justice space as social workers or planners or whatever. Then there is clearly, just because of the difference in background, there is of course challenges for them to work together and come together. But these sort of spaces and these groupings really, in one shot, they just break those barriers, because we're all talking about something which is so universal. I could be as privileged as anything, and I could have a very difficult life, but there are certain things which connect us. So the fact that even people can work together better helps. And I think some of it, it's not that all of this is new. I think some of it, of course, YUVA has had that culture also. But definitely in the last 2 to 3 years, we've tried to be more purposeful about it, be a little more, cognizant that we will invest time and energy in this, along with, of course, the other work that we need to do.
Yeah. And you talked about your sort of like your own idea of yourself as a leader having changed. Does it feel like that's impacting how other people see you? From your perspective, obviously, we can't ask them because they're not here right now. But
yeah. Yeah, I think my experience or my understanding of leadership has been very personal, deeply personal. Whatever knowledge I think or I claim to have is just based on personal experience, and I think that is so much more powerful than anything I could have read or heard. And I'm very thankful to have had the time and space in YUVA to explore this and have that autonomy. But I think being a leader is talking and working with yourself more inside than outside, and maybe that sort of confidence, maybe that is like the biggest, perhaps, a change that people might be seeing. And also I think this whole feeling of trust, I think that is also something that has definitely been much more strengthened when I've also had that shift in me, because the fact that she trusts the organization, or she trusts this team to do what they can do, there isn't this constant sort of, and there is a lot of autonomy, and that expectation, are something, the expectation is something that we can define, and it's not sort of, so I think it's not, and also it's not just about how perhaps they're looking at me, how they're also experiencing the shift in the culture. Like there is quite a lot of autonomy in terms of what you can do, how you can innovate, and that only comes from a space of trust. And sometimes the trust is also not like a scientific thing. It's not like you can say, okay, these 5 boxes are checked and hence I will trust you, or I will trust this team.
Right.
Almost like, it's like faith. You just have to have it, not religious, of course, but you have to have it, and in human beings, and like continue to hold on to it despite the setbacks, and find a way to work through those setbacks. So definitely I would like to believe, and I hope that some of those shifts have been are happening.
Yeah, I'm sure that they are. And I was wondering if, I know that you then work with other organizations and groupings in grassroots and stuff. I wonder how you see this kind of shift in how you think about leadership, whether it impacts what you do beyond YUVA as well in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, we do a lot of work with young people and also with, informal workers, so street vendors and domestic workers and so on. We have these groupings and we've done work on leadership, all of these things. And then what has happened, and this is not something that we openly discussed, but like all our youth work is also sort of getting centered now around conversation on leadership and, similar sorts of thoughts about how, we can actually, as young leaders, we can create something that, draws people. It's beyond that, last beyond me and surpass, because the young people's collectives, young people join for 4 to 5 years and then they move on because they grow up or whatever. And one of the challenges there is these collectives die because the original leaders move on. So by speaking about these leadership conversations in the collectives, along with whatever housing rights work they are doing, that really, helps to enable the longevity of that, because then already the people there are talking about, this is not just about us. We might have personal aspirations, but this space that we are working as a collective of young people in, Ambudwadi or wherever, will actually should sustain beyond us. And for that, we need to draw in more people. We need to really, you know, keep the field clear for others to work on. We need to push ourselves, but also push other people out of comfort zones. And employees of YUVA who've been part of these processes are sort of naturally also doing this with the youth groups, or with we're talking about values and constitutional values, etc. Again, some of this has been happening over the years in YUVA. We always focus on gender justice, social justice as things that we do work with collectives. But I think this whole sort of leadership, even that language is permeating, and hopefully it's impacting people. And we keep talking about it. I think it's also, if you want to shift things, it's the more you talk about it in different spaces in different ways, then it's sort of that narratives also shift. And if employees believe that they are leaders as opposed to just having a set of tasks that they have to do and perform, then I think that also naturally just shows in the work that we do in the communities.
And I wonder, I don't know whether you do, but I wonder if this kind of shift in your thinking and that around, like, whether you were a leader that kind of had to take responsibility for everything and kind of be the person at the top of a hierarchy towards this kind of everyone's a leader idea. I wonder if does that show up in the collectives as well, or if, I don't know. I just wonder if it does, or the challenge of it.
I think that's actually a challenge, in terms of, if you talk about decentralizing and not having, an idea about every single thing that's happening at every minute of the day, sort of having that trust, both decision making and also accountability. So that is a reality. There's a lot of autonomy, not so much microcontrol. The good thing there is you have flexibility, right? People feel that they can innovate on the ground. There's also agility. Also, the sort of civil society space in India, as in other countries, democratic space are really shrinking, and there's a lot of pressure both on organizations and on the politics we do on the ground. So in this sort of a space, being a little more autonomous helps you be agile. So you know that what time to stand up to something and what times to step back, so that, because you need the work to continue, you can't just go all or nothing. So that agility definitely is there. But also, we face barriers where some people do expect that everything should be defined. It becomes a challenge to sort of retain that collective faith, in the unknown, right? Some take much more easily to this. Of course, I think it's also personalities, but I think it's about guiding each other to work within frameworks which are limited and not made of brick and cement, maybe just made out of string, so you can really push, but work with energy and drive, right? So I think that is a challenge, and we have to keep trying to find that balance. Um, but I think there are, some people who take easily to this, and that's an opportunity for these people to sort of take the lead on working on this with others and supporting. And again, we see this emerging. It's not like we have gone and said, okay, you work on this or you work on that. it's almost as if, people realize that if this is coming naturally to them, or it's something that they feel more comfortable doing, then maybe they can play a larger role in trying to, work on this sort of these sort of things with other people, where they encourage others to say, okay, you might have, a key results area of 5 points, but let's look at that, but let's also set that aside and innovate some. Let's talk about something else. Use your own ideas. You be free. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, and we talk about that. We say we don't need to be there. Our minds don't need to be in every single place at every single moment of time. It's okay, and of course, it's not that everything is going to be perfect, but uh, I think the gains are will be better than the losses, because it
Mhm.
really people, we don't need to like force down anything. People are just working because they want to be there, and they want to come, and they want to show up, and they want to do something, and I think it makes more sense to them. Yeah,
Mm.
again, not
Mm.
perfect, but that's the direction, we want to
Yeah, I
go.
sometimes think that the idea of perfection can really work against us in
Yeah,
some of these
really.
things, right?
Yeah,
Because it's like if we're looking for perfect alternative structures, and it's
yeah,
something that Ella and I were talking about earlier, right? I know you were listening. If we're looking for a perfect alternative to what we might see
yeah.
as being problematic, then that can sometimes trip us up because, right, it's
Trip.
not, it's not,
Yeah,
it's not perfect.
yeah.
But it's something about, I'm hearing you talking about creating some different kinds of really relational space, really, for people to explore what their leadership is, what their relationship to one another and their work is and stuff. And I think it sounds like that's been really valuable. So
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm wondering, like, if you I know you came into YUVA at a certain point, but say you were in a, like, sort of somewhere different, and then you were starting again, how might you would you structure leadership differently? Like, would you still have a director? Like, I don't know. I'm just because we're talking about
Hmm.
leadership, I'm interested.
Yeah,
You think
that's interesting.
mm,
I've been actually thinking a lot about this, and we've been talking a lot also,
mhm,
because again, Yuva is now at that space where you don't have people here forever. People move on and move out. So, what are those structures? So like collective
mhm,
leadership. You guys all spoke about it.
mhm,
Um, Decision making. Is decentralized. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I have an answer,
mhm,
but definitely finding a space where, if we can create a space where everybody feels valued for what they're doing, and truly, and they feel that the organization is truly investing in them, and not just because we have to check a diversity box, or because we have to
mhm,
ensure that we have some ratings of workplace well-being or whatever, but actually believing in it. Then I would feel that as long as the structure that the organization would have to adapt is not too airtight and
mhm,
open to change, I think that would be most important. So it's okay, maybe you might have sort of teams and then managers and then something else, but as long as that's not set in stone, uh,
mhm,
and then you can maybe change, like, so maybe one whole vertical or maybe one whole thematic doesn't need a single shining star, because there are lots of people who are good at doing different things. So as long as you're able to have the flexibility, then I
mhm,
think it's better not to prescribe that this is the
mhm,
structure or this is what you should do. If you have
mhm,
that foundation of, we'll value everyone and we will actually respect their contributions, and make them feel that what they're doing is important. I think if these two things we can do, then whatever structure we have or don't have can be modified and played around with. So that's what I'm feeling, because we felt at one point, should we look at like collective, maybe have a team of 4 5 people who are going to then be taking decisions. So we've done some, I wouldn't say very in-depth experiments, but we have sort of tried. Right now, we are feeling, let's not fixate on one or the other. Let's
mhm,
just work with these basic concepts. Let's work on the principles and the concepts and the way we
mhm,
are working with people, and let the that hierarchy and the structure sort of naturally make itself redundant, without necessarily announcing a new structure or having anything too much fanfare. I think if we focus here, then this becomes automatically. I mean, that's what we are think. That's our current thinking, I would say. And maybe if I
Mm,
were to go anywhere else or be anywhere else, this would be similar. Like not to go there and suddenly say that we'll stop this and we'll do something else. Let's be a little more organic and work with what we have and just work with people rather than the structure. I think that would be that would be my current thinking.
interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Roshni. I wanted to just pick up one thing in what you said there, because a lot of times in Healing Solidarity, we talked about diversity issues in international NGOs, but I know that you think about diversity issues in your own
Hmm.
context, and you've got some thinking around that, or some practice around that. It'd be interesting if you could share a little bit about how that's
Yeah.
been working in you and how you've been thinking
Yeah.
about it.
I mean, I think this was like one of the very important legacies that we did have with Yuva, that you were always focused on having a very mixed group of people, whether men, women, beyond the two binaries, also looking at, caste diversity, which is very important for us, and
Yeah,
also educational diversity, not just valuing, certain path education pathway, but valuing experience as
yeah.
equally as education, formal education. So we've been privileged and lucky, I would say, that we've always had a very diverse, sort of uh, a pool at Yuva. But also for us in the last few years, I think it's not so much been about ensuring that we have so many people. That has been, we've had that structure, and Yuva also attracts that sort of talent. And even our hiring process, we are not always fixated on education. We are quite open to hiring people from different gender orientation, which is also very difficult in the social space. You would think it's not, but it is. So you would
Mm,
have gender minority people identifying themselves as gender minorities working in maybe a gender minority only organization, but not in your mainstream organization. So some of that is needs to be purposeful. Also,
mhm,
special abilities. I think that's
mhm,
something we have not been able to yet do, but that's also, you will not find too many people in mainstream organizations.
mhm.
There might be an organization that works on disability rights, which will have people with special abilities, but not the mainstream, activist
Yeah,
sort of social justice organization. So some of that we do need to be purposeful, but I think
yeah.
we attract, quite a diverse audience. But the challenge I think for us has been the downstream. When you do have so much diversity, how do you make sure that there is respect? Because I think it seems basic, but I think it starts with that. How can I respect somebody who has never been to school, but is really amazing at organizing a campaign, versus how can I respect somebody who has had a life of privilege, is very young, and comes with a lot of maybe conceptual theoretical knowledge, but and a lot of sincerity, but maybe hasn't had any experience. So it works
Mhm,
both ways. Like, how do we really respect each other? Uh,
mhm,
and one is not better than the other. Like without any sort of in a very neutral sort of a sense, without affording any specific bias to either group. That has been the challenge for us, and these sort of groupings that we're doing have, one of the issues there is to really push those barriers. So if I'm of a
mhm,
certain, this is my background, how can I accept and respect the other, and also how can I be accepted and respected? And this is also something we do in the larger groups. And it happens, there's age, issues of age,
yeah.
issue of gender orientation, issues of education, caste, of course. uh, but I mean, I think that is important. And mm, it's interesting, it's very interesting, because right now Yuva is, I would say 70% of us are less than 35 years of age, so it's pretty much a very young organization. So then there's this whole the issue of young people who come in and who have different aspirations and a different way of approaching the world.
Mhm,
And then you have people who are a little older, who have completely different orientations to even social justice work and what is their understanding of it. So it's been
mhm,
very interesting. Sometimes we do have to be purposeful, but I think the downs, rather than just getting diverse diversity as on paper. It's really about how do you make sure that diversity leads to a better way, a better organization, a better way of working. That is,
Mhm.
I think, the bigger challenge,
Yeah.
and that's where we are sort of putting in some efforts to work on. And but a lot of ideas also emerge. Once we start talking about this, people have their own ideas. So somebody who's a young professional who's done social work will have good ideas about how we can connect with somebody who's worked in the in the community for so many years and may not understand or the language that social workers use. So lots of ideas emerge from from our employees themselves.
Yeah, from it sounds like from actually intentionally talking about these issues, because I think sometimes that
Yeah,
can be the
exactly. The very fact that you recognize that this is an issue and let's talk about it, let's move beyond. I think you're right. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
uh, and I just wanted to ask one follow, and I wanted to invite questions as well. If anyone listening has a question for Roshni, please do share them with us. And then my sort of final question was, given that you're bringing up all these different conversations and stuff, has that brought up conflict that you've had to manage, or not so much manage, but embrace?
Yeah.
And have you got any reflections on that you might want to share with people?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things. One of the, when we also started doing some of these processes, one of the big criticism that we faced uh, from outside, from outside the organization, we were asked questions like, "So who's the face of YUVA? How much
Mm-hmm,
experience does your team even have? Everybody is so young, What are you doing now if you're not doing those things that you used to do, And so these sorts of questions, they make you doubt your own, ways of working,
mm-hmm,
and it's difficult to keep that faith alive. But I mean, I think this was one of the definite challenges that we had to really work on. Sort of, it was then that leads to sort of conversation inside, right? Or maybe
mm-hmm,
that's the right model. Maybe we do need to find somebody who can be the face in this space or
mm-hmm.
in that space. So that might lead us off track. So
Yeah,
then to really bring it back, and so facing that external criticism, especially because Yuva is also an old organization in these spaces, and there is a certain identity and a certain expectation, it becomes
yeah.
harder when you have newer people. That definitely has been sort of an outside pressure. Inside also, I mean, I think um, it's not always easy for everyone also to accept some of these things, where you say that okay, maybe you have a certain designation, but what we are going to do is we're going to experiment differently, and we're going to let people take their own decisions, and maybe you will not have the final say. So then there is definitely a lot of resistance to that. And that,
Mm-hmm,
depending again on the people concerned, sometimes passive aggressive, sometimes it's openly aggressive, then we will have to work, so we are also trying, like, we try to do these sort of individual pairing up of people, so that
mm-hmm,
it's not like line manager and whatever, but it's more like who we feel might work together and who can converse with each other. So if we feel that that sort of a thing is happening, we do have these informal pairs. Sometimes also formally we decide on that and find spaces to work through that. So, like, we use these sorts of techniques, but there
mm-hmm,
is resistance internally, especially, I mean, when you say that people who have a formal designation or a position uh, opt up for, we are going to open it up. That's where the
mm-hmm.
most resistance lies.
Right.
When you talk to people who perhaps don't have a formal designation, it's more about confidence building and
Mm-hmm,
giving them that space. But it's not resistance. It's more, I would say, lack of confidence. But the resistance comes from those who already have certain ways. And external resistance, though, is an ongoing thing, which I think, as long as our support structure internally is strong, then we are capable of dealing with that as well. Which so far
mm-hmm.
it is. That's good. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Roshni, for
Thanks.
all. I really enjoyed talking with you. I want to just give a final chance if anyone wants to ask anything, but I'm going to close this in a minute, and then we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And when we come back at 3 p.m., so British Summer Time, 3 p.m., I'm going to be with Ursula Goldsmith. So that when I close this down, there's a question. Hold on. I'll come off the practicalities. Yeah. So someone's asking, how did the new leadership strategy reflect in your financials? How did YUVA plan to look into performance appraisals or promotions or salaries? So I guess in relation to this, yeah.
Financials, I'm not sure. I mean, I understood what we decided to do because some of this takes time, energy, and money. We did start putting in some of this in our projects, in our budget lines, in terms of, leadership development. So we did, not everybody, not every donor supported it, but some did, and we sort of managed with that in terms of ensuring that we had enough money to do these sorts of strategies because they do cost money. We didn't go all out and hire external experts who evaluate. We kept it local, we kept it internal. We spoke to people who knew us or who would come on pro bono. So in that way, it wasn't a big investment, and we don't think it needs to be. I think that that is in terms of financials. In terms of performance appraisals and promotions, at YUVA, we've had a very, very sort of very serious and intense performance appraisal for the last, many years, where we initially talk about the values, how our values have been reinforced or conflicted during the year. Then we have whatever are our sort of key result areas, we analyze that as well. And then we also have team performance, sort of team conversations. So it's not just the line manager and the person. It's also teams themselves put in inputs, and there's like an open conversation where all the members of the team will reflect on each other, and that is also included into the performance appraisal. And we do have whatever ratings and all, but that is only about the tasks that have been assigned to for the year. Beyond that, there's a lot of space for discussion of what else was done, how the team works, and that is not necessarily added up quantitatively. That is, kept more in the reflection space, and those inputs are also taken. So the final decision after, I and you sit for a performance appraisal, another committee looks through all the details, the qualitative and the numbers, and then the final decisions are taken in terms of promotions or salaries. So there is, again, I mean, I think going back to, there is some structure, but we are not, a slave of that structure. So we will have some structure and there will be some, but there is a lot of space for sharing more about the intangibles, which are difficult to sort of also measure, and both are equally important while we do the appraisal. But this has been something that YUVA has traditionally been doing. We've been tweaking it here and there, but it seems to work for us.
Great, thanks, Roshni.
Thanks.
So
also,
yeah, thank you so much for being with us. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm really enjoying the kind of collective of these conversations today as well. So I'm going to close this session, and we will thank you, and we'll be back on the hour. Well, actually it's on the half hour in Mumbai, right? But on the hour in London with Esma. So thanks so much. Take care. Bye bye. Have a good evening. Bye.